Good morning. We're going to be in Romans chapters 10 and 11 this morning. Romans chapters 10 and 11. Looking forward to our study together. Good to be back. I had a good trip in Columbiana. Didn't even know where that was for most of my life. But really good time with other preachers and having a workshop and learning new things that hopefully I can use and make me more effective. Um, as we think about Romans, we've been studying a lot. We've been understanding more about salvation and the gospel. Really, that's at the heart of Paul's purpose in writing the letter to the Romans, is to explain their salvation that they have already received and are enjoying in Rome. But also, throughout the book, there's been this recognition that there's a Jewish audience in the church at Rome, and there's also a Gentile audience. And so he's been trying hard to make it clear that the Jews and the Gentiles both can receive salvation by God's grace through faith, and it's been made available to everyone who believes. Last time we looked at how God made it so easy for us to receive salvation. It's not a matter of trying really hard and working and being a law-keeping person who is becoming righteous all by ourselves, but it's a matter of accepting the grace that God has given and putting our trust and our faith in that grace that has been offered and extended to us, and calling out for God to save us and willing to change our lives and do what's right. But as we talk to people around us, understanding the gospel, understanding the hope that we have received, it's very difficult. Maybe there's somebody in your life who you have talked to about the gospel. Maybe you've even had tears in your eyes as you've tried to help them see and understand their lost condition and their need to repent and to trust in the grace that God has offered them through Jesus Christ and submit their lives to God. And in all your efforts, they've just shrugged it off. Maybe they scoff, maybe they laugh, maybe they're just overall indifferent. And you've tried and you've tried and you've prayed maybe year after year, hoping that you could convince them. They haven't done it. Maybe you were like Paul at the beginning of chapter 9, who said, I wish that I myself could give up my salvation so that all of Israel could receive salvation. Maybe you had that kind of heart and attitude about someone you've loved. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a child, maybe it's a friend or a coworker or someone who's so close to you, or maybe it's just somebody who you've gotten to know and you really just have a heart for their salvation like Paul does, and they haven't responded. It's crushing. It's heartbreaking. It hurts. And maybe you thought, what is the point? Why am I doing this? You know, Paul ached for Israel to be saved much like that. He desired for them to turn from their evil, to trust in Jesus as their Messiah, and to receive the salvation that he offers them. And his desire for the people has not waned over the years, as he's writing this years after being converted and years after trying to teach the gospel to the Jews. And so, should he give up on them? Should he just say, enough is enough? Should he, so to speak, get the dust off of his shoes and walk away? Should he stop casting his pearls before swine and just go ahead and assume that the Jews are a lost cause? Well, today, the text that we're going to see shows us that that's not what Paul will do. That's not his attitude toward those who are lost. So it shouldn't be ours either. And that's what we're going to be learning about as we study this text. How do you feel toward the lost, toward those who are around you who have rejected the truth of the gospel? I brought up somebody who you love, who you have this admiration or desire for them to be saved, but what about everybody else? How do you feel toward people who are lost? What's your reaction to their rejection of the gospel? Notice Israel is described as rejecting the gospel in chapter 10, verse 18. He says, I asked then, have they not heard? Talking about Israel. Indeed they have, for their voice has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. But I ask, did Israel not understand? First, Moses says, I will make you jealous of those who are not a nation. With a foolish nation, I will make you angry. And then Isaiah is so bold as to say, I have been found by those who do not seek me. I have shown myself to those who did not ask for me. But of Israel, he says, all day long I have held out my hand to a disobedient and contrary people. Look at this picture of Israel. That Paul is saying they have no excuse. They have heard the truth of the gospel. It was proclaimed everywhere. And notice he brings up the fact that it was heard and understood by everyone. Even those who were not Jews understood this message and they received it. So it's not a matter of the message being too difficult, or it's not a matter of them not being able to hear or understand it. It's really just a matter of they are defiant and rebellious and refuse to submit themselves to God's will on this matter. And that's what he says here. All day long I've held out my hands to a disobedient and contrary people. God has made salvation easy. He has made salvation possible for everyone. And the Gentiles are eating it up. And he says, I'm going to use that. Notice in this text, he alludes to what he's going to talk about in chapter 11. He says in verse 19, I will make you jealous of those who are not a nation. With a foolish nation, I will make you angry. And he discusses the Gentiles not seeking him, but being found by them. And so he's bringing this up to prepare us for what he's going to talk about next. But the point of this is to say Israel has rejected God. They have stumbled over the stumbling stone, and they are the problem. They are the problem. Not God, not his message, not his means of saving, but them, their hearts. So that opens up the question. Has God then rejected his people? Look at verse 1 of chapter 11. I asked then, has God rejected his people? By no means. Notice just in these first few words of this verse that he's pointed out all throughout chapters 9 and 10 that Israel has become defiant and stubborn and rebellious. And then he asked this question, has God then rejected them? And we might think the easy answer is, yeah, they rejected him. And so therefore he has turned and rejected them. But notice he says, by no means. And he's not saying, by no means. They rejected him. He didn't reject them. They rejected him. No, he's saying by no means, because he's going to make the point, God has not rejected his people. Listen to it. For I myself am an Israelite. He's going to give two examples. The first one is himself. For I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Do you not know that what the scripture says about Elijah? How he appeals to God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets. They have demolished your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what is God's reply to him? I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. But if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. So he asks the question, has God rejected Israel? And his answer is no. No, he has not rejected Israel. Not at the time of this writing. As Paul is writing to these Roman Christians, God had not rejected Israel. And in fact, God had never rejected Israel before this time. Over and over again, God makes a way for Israel to continue. He saves a remnant of them whenever the Babylonian captivity comes. And he keeps them alive through that. And he sustains them and he supports them and he builds them back up. And so God has been patient as they become extremely idolatrous and rebellious. He has just been so faithful to them when they did not deserve it. God is continually pouring himself out to the Israelites to provide for them so that they can receive the salvation that Jesus is offering. And now the salvation is here and they're not accepting it. And God is still not rejecting them. And he brings up two examples to show God is still not rejecting them when this was written in the 50s AD. First example is himself. Who is Paul? Hebrew of Hebrews, an Israelite. Oh, well, Paul's an interesting case, right? He heard the gospel and he didn't refuse it. He accepted it. No, he didn't. Do you know what happened when Paul heard the gospel preached from Stephen's mouth? He approved of their stoning of Stephen. Paul didn't listen when the gospel was preached to him. He rejected the gospel. And he was ready to go out and to capture all these Christians and to bring them and throw them in jail and leading to their death in some cases. And so he was obstinate. He was rebellious. He was defiant. He was unwilling to yield to God and to accept the grace of God that was being offered in the gospel. And so as you look at Paul, you might see him before his conversion and think, there is no way this guy will ever be a Christian. He is the most stubborn and defiant and rebellious. He doesn't care anything about what Jesus has said or done. He's not looking at these miracles. I mean, the miracles happen in front of him and he doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him. He has no hope. But God looked at him, Jesus looked at him and saw something different than we would have seen. He saw an opportunity that the conversion of Saul, or Paul, would show and demonstrate the perfect patience of Christ toward the most stubborn and rebellious soul on earth. That's what he says in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15, that in me, Christ might display his perfect patience as an example to those who were to believe in him for eternal life. Is God going to be patient toward a stubborn, rebellious, defiant, evil person? Yes, he will be patient. Is he going to offer them an opportunity to be forgiven when they've done such horrible atrocities? Yes. He did. And Paul is an example of that. And so he's making this point. Has God rejected his own people? Has he rejected Israel, who has stubbornly, defiantly rejected the gospel message? No, he hasn't. Because he didn't reject me whenever I was stubborn and rebellious and defiant. And so he uses himself as an example. Then he gives us another example. But notice in that first example that we see a lost soul is not exactly what it seems. We might write people off. We might disregard somebody. Oh, they're a scoffer. Oh, they don't care. They'll never listen. And yet Paul was converted, and his conversion was a wonderful blessing for the church in the first century. But then he brings this other example, and the other example is Elijah. Elijah was a great preacher. He was a man who was very passionate and zealous for God, and he noticed that Israel was idolatrous under Ahab and Jezebel, and he hated that. He noticed that Jezebel coming in brought all kinds of idol-worshiping prophets, and all kinds of evil was spreading throughout the land. And so he prayed to God, God, hold back the rain for these people. Let them suffer, so that then their hearts will turn back to you. And they suffered for 3 years. And Elijah was on the run, and he's eating whatever a raven brings him. He's drinking from a stream. And then God says, it's time. And so he calls Ahab, and they go up to Mount Carmel, and there's this great feat that Elijah is sure is going to convince everybody in all Israel that there is only one God who is real. They get their fires set up, and the prophets of Baal call out to their God to bring fire. They get the wood and everything laid out. Oh, call out louder. I love that text, right? He might be in the bathroom. You need to call out louder. They cut themselves. They're trying to get their God to do something. He doesn't do anything. And then Elijah throws water on everything and calls out to God. Boom, everything's done. Elijah goes, see there? There's only one true God. Now surely all Israel will be saved. Elijah's so happy, so excited. He picks up his coat, and after it rains and everything, he picks up his coat. He runs back to Samaria, to the city that is the capital city, excited to see what's going to happen. They kill all the prophets of Baal there. And then Jezebel says, oh no, that won't be happening in my city. That won't be happening in my country. And she sends out men to kill Elijah and to kill all the prophets of God. And then he goes and he's on the run, and he runs all the way back to Mount Horeb. And he is saddened and longing for God to do something. And he's distraught because he sees that all Israel will not be saved because of this mighty thing that he's done. And God comes to him and he says, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? Oh, I've been faithful. I've worshipped. I've served you faithfully. And Israel is just killing your prophets. They're demolishing your altars. I'm the only one left, and they seek my life. I'm it. Just kill me, God. That's kind of his attitude. There's no hope. None of Israel will be saved. And God says, no. There are 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed a knee to Baal. Paul bringing this up is important in the context because it might feel like there is no hope for Israel at this time. He's been on missionary journeys and he's dealt with the Jews. And if you read through Acts, you get the same cycle happening. Some Jews believe, but then the rest of them turn hostile. They get jealous, they get mean, they get envious, and they attack him. And so that hostility can cause you to be hardened toward them and callous toward them and thinking, well, there's no hope that they'll ever be saved. And here he points to Elijah, and the lesson that Elijah was supposed to learn is, don't let that hostility get you down. Just because some are really loud and really hard against you doesn't mean that everyone is evil and unwilling to hear the truth that you're trying to present to them. And so the feelings that we need to have toward the lost are that God has not rejected these stubborn, rebellious, defiant people, but he has among them some who will be turned, who will be saved, who will be convinced of the truth of the gospel. And so the attitude in the heart that Paul wants the Christians in Rome to have is the attitude in the heart that we also need to have. That these stubborn, rebellious people out here that we think will never listen, they'll never change, stop it. There are some who God will turn their hearts to the truth of the gospel, and they will be saved. And so that's the message that we're finding as we look throughout this text. Something interesting is is happening in the mind of God as we're studying through this. Paul is revealing to us some interesting facts about the mind of God, the way God looks and sees and thinks about the people who are evil and wicked is not the way that we look and we think about the people who are wicked. Look at verse 7. It says, "What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see, ears that would not hear, down to this very day." And David said, "Let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see and bend their backs forever." So I ask, did they stumble in order that they may fall? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation comes to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? Now, I'm speaking to you, Gentiles, inasmuch then as I'm an apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my ministry in order somehow to make my fellow Jews jealous and thus save some of them. For if their rejection means reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? Now, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm not going to have time to unpack it all, but there's a very important idea that he's getting across here. Israel has rejected the gospel, and God has taken an action. He has not rejected them and cut them off and said, "I'm not dealing with you anymore. I'm going off to other people, and you're lost, and you'll be lost forever." But the picture is that he has hardened those who refuse to hear the gospel. There's a lot of misconceptions about hardening and how God hardens. We're actually going to look at Pharaoh tonight. So if you're really confused or interested in that, I encourage you to come tonight and listen as we learn about Pharaoh and God hardening Pharaoh's heart. But notice here that he says in verse 11, this critical verse, I asked, did they stumble in order that they might fall? He just said God hardened them. So why does he ask this question? Did they stumble that they might fall? Well, God hardened them. So obviously they fell and they're done. But he makes a distinction here. They have stumbled. When we stumble, we can fall or we can correct. And so he's making this kind of point that they refused and rejected the word. They stumbled. And now God has done something to try to prevent them from falling. What has he done? Well, he's hardened them. He's made them even more obstinate, even more hostile toward the gospel. And that hardening is happening to them, not arbitrarily or randomly. It's not anything like that, but that is happening to them because they've already refused the gospel. Hardening does not happen to the righteous. He's not hardening someone who is the sincere seeker and is open to the truth. He's hardening someone who has heard the word and rejected it. And he's doing that for a specific reason. He talks about that in Romans 1. And we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. God gives them over to their evil thoughts and passions and desires. But hardening here is what's very important in this lesson is hardening doesn't mean destroying. God is not destroying his people when he hardens them. He is trying to show them their own darkened thoughts and their own foolishness. He's letting them bite and devour one another and bring about strife and pain and suffering in their sins so that they will not be destroyed in the end. He's letting them suffer. In this, we see a picture that God wants them to be saved as they see the Gentiles being included. God's not given up on those who stumble. He wants them to be saved. This is the mind of God. He has this all in plan. As the earlier prophecy said, I'm going to make them jealous. It's all part of his plan. You see how God has a way of thinking that's totally beyond what we could ever imagine or think. We look at these hostile, evil, rebellious people, and we think, oh, there's no hope. They're swine. I'm not casting my pearls before them. I'm not even giving them a chance. And God is saying, I'm making them jealous. I'm making them desire what you have. I'm making them see their own foolishness so that they'll change. So reach out to them. And offer it to them and watch and see how they respond. It's easy for us to give up on those who are stumbling, those who appear to have a hard heart and are hostile against us. But God doesn't do that. God doesn't do that. Do we want everyone to be saved? Do we? Everyone. A lot of people take this passage and they just start going off in this direction, talking about Israel. But what I see in this as I'm studying this is a group of people that appear to be beyond hope of reconciling. And God has a plan to help them come back. Is there a group of people in your life or in your mind who you would say are without, beyond hope because of their foolishness and their stubbornness and their evil? Do you want them to be saved? We need to have the thick skin, a tender heart, but thick skin whenever we're dealing with people who are around us. Many times as I've studied with people or taught the truth to people, I've taken the rejection of the gospel personally. And we can do that, can't we? That you didn't reject God, you rejected me. It hurt my feelings. I don't want to teach you anymore. I don't want to be around you anymore. But here we see Paul loves them, and he keeps coming back for more. In Acts, he makes the decision. I'm going to Jerusalem to preach, and all along the way, everybody's telling him, "You're going to be in chains. You're going to be imprisoned if you do this." And he says, "I've got to do this. This is my people. These are my kinsmen. I love them. I want them to hear the truth." And he goes and he teaches them. Even though they end up throwing him in jail and he ends up suffering and being hindered in other ways, you can see he has such a love that he keeps going back to them and wanting to teach them the truth, even at great expense to himself. A lot of times we view that text, don't throw your pearls before swine or things like that, and we just write people off. Well, understand, there might need to be a break. We might need to let that sit, whatever we've said sit, and we might need to leave them alone for a time. But if you love them, you'll go back for more. If you love them, you will believe that God can turn that hardened, impenitent heart. He can pierce it with his word, and God can transform it through the gospel. And if you love them, you will want that more than anything else. And it will keep driving you to continue to talk about uncomfortable things that are spiritual that people around you need to hear. Who's on your mind right now? You probably have somebody. I know I do. Who's on your mind right now? Think about them. Think about your relationship. Think about all the spiritual conversations you've had up until this point. Has it come to a close, and are you just waiting and maybe thinking it'll never happen again? We'll never have this conversation again. Understand something. God has not totally rejected that person. In fact, while you were away from them, God might be working in that person's life with a lot of people that are around them, preparing them for your next conversation. He could be tenderizing that heart, getting it all ready. And so we need to understand that there are more people out there than we can imagine who have stumbled and they've not yet fallen, and they're ready, they're waiting for you to say something spiritual and open up the door for them to receive the truth of the gospel and start living with hope in the future after this life is over. Ecclesiastes, we learn everything in this life is vanity. So you give people enough time, they're going to come to the realization whatever they're focused on, whatever their God is empty and vain and nothing. It's like grasping the wind. You hit them at the right time, you will help them to see the vanity of their current lifestyle, and you will help them to see the hope that they can have in the future. Always think, God may be closer to saving them than I realize. Even as they're cussing you out or scoffing at you or laughing at you or doing whatever it is that they do to reject you, they may be even closer than you realize. Something you said may have struck a nerve with them, and it may be hitting them deep, and you might need to show just a little bit more love and bring them the rest of the way. So don't give up. Hopefully this has been helpful and encouraging to you as you think about those who are around you who are lost. I hope you don't get discouraged to the point of keeping silent and not speaking to people who are around you about God and about the wonderful blessings He's given to all of us. If we remain silent, the light dims, the hope fades, and people around us need hope. They need the light. So don't forget to speak all these things to those around you. If you're here today and you know the truth of the gospel and you need assistance in any way, we're here to help you. If you're struggling in your faith, we're also here to help you and encourage you. Feel free to come as we stand and as we sing.